Yeah.
Okay. Hey everyone, this is Johnny Carnivorous Ape here with Keith Dodson, who wanted to chat with me for a little bit and give me his views on, I guess, philosophy and religion. Is that basically what we're doing?
Just kind of like, I guess, more or less the track, like trying to understand that some people use relative as a term for morals, based on the relativity of, the different demographic areas of the planet. But then also, how I kind of went from atheism to agnosticism to Christianity and scientific discoveries that kind of pushed me, I guess, in that direction.
Okay. That's more than fine. But you said just a little bit ago that you were wanting to, we had the discussion about the difference between kind of like talking over each other when it comes to, whether morals are subjective or objective.
Right.
Okay. Getting back into that, we like we said, we did kind of agree that it pretty much depends on how you look at it. Whereas the Christian moral view, they believe that it's objective because they're either the morals are written on our hearts, or they all stem from the Bible, which is essentially like a teacher's lesson plan, which becomes moral or becomes objective after it's laid out, but it still comes from a subjective nature.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would really be able to call the Christian God subjective if he's the all-powerful sort of creator of everything, because he would be the one creating everything. Okay. So he would be the objective layout plan for the worldview, the creation of the earth, the creation of morals and free will and everything that's kind of in it. So in reality, in my reality of the Christian worldview, the Bible would be the objective worldview based on.
Okay, let me see if I can.
Written.
Let me see if I can correct myself. That way you'll agree with me. It's not that the Bible itself is not objective, but it's the Christian subjective interpretation of the Bible. Would you agree with that? I
mean, I don't know how you'd be able to like subjectively interpret it a different way from him being a creator.
Well, but, I mean,
so if I look at the Bible, right? So
mm-hmm.
I guess if I look at the Bible and I go, well, yeah, I believe in that Bible. So to me, that Bible's objectively, but you might look at the Bible and the Christian God and go, well, subjectively, I don't think that's it. So to you, it might not be objective because you don't believe in that. But that's also like, I mean, then we kind of get down a rabbit hole of like,
Well, I'm talking about like the difference between Baptists and Pentecostals and Catholics and, all these different sects of the Bible or of Christianity where they interpret something slightly differently.
Right. There are, right. I mean, there's 4,200 different religions, but you could look at it the same way as you look at the laws in the United States today. And there could be laws that you believe in that I don't believe in. You know what I mean? So we're getting down a rabbit hole of all these different scenarios of, it's basically based on one's belief is what I believe becomes objective. Objectivity to me comes out of somebody's wants and beliefs. If you believe that this is good, then that's good, but so I believe that the Bible's good. So I believe that the commandments are good. Whereas, you go over to the Middle East, somebody might not think that the 10 Commandments are good, and they don't believe in that, So one subjective opinion can create objective views, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah, that makes a little bit more sense. So yeah, I'm gonna have to slightly disagree with you on that, just a little bit.
Sure.
Because, like, if you think about it, you said you used to be an atheist.
Yeah.
Over here, atheists are usually they're just kind of ostracized and mocked. Whereas if you go over to the Middle East and you have certain Islamic countries that are that are basically policing thoughts nowadays and basically saying that atheists are terrorists.
Yeah, no. So I
So,
disagree with the fact that all atheists are terrorists. Okay, so I
mhm,
guess the only thing that I look at, so atheists, right, is a belief that there is no deity,
exactly.
right? So to have a belief, so to believe in something means that you kind of know that there isn't, and not saying that you know 100%, but it's also part of knowing. You know, you have to have a belief in something. So if you believe that there's no deity, you kind of, to me, I would think you would have to know everything. And
Okay.
if you know what I mean, like, because if you know everything, then you can know that there is no deity, right? But then if you don't know everything, the deity could exist in the other half of stuff that you don't know. So
Okay.
that is
Let
what
me
pushed me
correct
over
myself real
to
quick.
agnostic.
Uh, Atheism is not the belief that there is no God. It's the belief that we can't know positively or negatively.
Well, isn't that more agnostic? That would be more agnostic.
Well, no, see, that's the thing. Gnosticism and theism are two different things. It's actually two separate categories. Theism is the belief
Right.
of a God.
Of a deity, right.
Gnosticism is knowledge.
Right. So
So
agnostic doesn't have the knowledge, or thinks that you could never have the knowledge to know.
yes, a pure agnostic is basically just somebody who sits on the fence.
Right. Right.
However, like say, I don't know if you know who Richard Dawkins is, but he
I
actually
do.
came up with a decent scale that's like 0 to 7. That you have, or sorry, 1 to 7. One being a Gnostic theist, they know for a fact that their God exists.
Right.
7 being a Gnostic atheist, they know for a fact that no gods can exist. Most atheists that I know of sit around 6, which is, we're going to live like there's no God because we don't see any evidence of it, but we're not going to take that extra step and jump in and say that there is absolutely no way a God can exist.
Right. Right. Okay. I totally can see that. All right. Makes
That's actually
sense.
why on the debate they had me labeled as an agnostic atheist.
Gotcha. No, and that makes total sense. It does for sure. It actually lets me know your worldview a little bit better too. For
Mm-hmm.
sure. Um, but what direction would you want to go next? Do you want to continue talking about the relative moralism, or do you want to talk more about what we were getting into about how I kind of went from one to the next to the other?
Why don't you go ahead and tell me about what led you there? Because that actually sounds interesting. I mean, I'm actually curious how you get from atheist to agnostic to just Christian.
Yeah, yeah. So again, I was totally kind of in your shoes, where I didn't know if there wasn't a God or if there was. So I was kind of at that point for a long time. And part of me getting to where I'm at is kind of stepping back and looking at how I was raised, right?
Hmm.
Because we're all subjected to how we're raised, so if you go to a Christian school, you grow up believing in God. If you go to a secular school, you don't grow up believing in a God. If you don't go to school, you might not grow up believing in anything and not knowing to believe that there is a belief in a religion. So we're all kind of subjected to that, and like, I kind of remember going back in the kindergarten, you open up the dinosaur book and the first sentence out of there is millions of years ago, so I feel like from a kid, being a young kid, I was kind of sort of indoctrinated into believing as a little child that this world was already millions of years old, not knowing other worldviews, just because of what I was reading. Um, and that's obviously a realization that I've had in the last few years here, which made me start to question, and look deeper into things. Um, and so, because I was more like, you know what, I can't say that there is, and I can't say that there isn't. That's why I kind of labeled myself more agnostic than being an atheist. And so, like I said, I started doing more investigations, watching a lot more debates between a lot of different people. I've spent probably hundreds of hours watching different debates. I've watched Richard Dawkins on debates. I've
Hmm.
watched like people like Kent Hovind on debates. I watch the modern debate channel a lot of times, and I watch a lot of them. I've seen Aaron Raw. I've watched a lot of different debaters and different people who have had totally different worldviews or similar
What's your opinion
worldviews.
on Kent Hovind?
On Kent Hovind,
Yeah.
So a lot of the stuff that I've watched of his, to me, makes sense. I don't know if Kent will go into complete deep detail because he's not maybe specifically, hasn't trained in, like, for example, one area of expertise to where he could cross the T's and dot the I's. So to me, he's more of just a teacher that, like you and I were talking about earlier, can lay out a plan and kind of underline everything and kind of show you what their view is and what their objective view is. And I think he does a good job, explaining his stance and defending his stance for what he believes in. And there's a few things that I've watched from Kent was part of my going from being agnostic to Christianity, and I have to totally be completely open about that. A few of the things that were not really so related to him, I mean, maybe in one of the two debates, but I've seen other debaters bring it up, was that when you and I were talking about the moon, right? So, so scientists have kind of proven, and I don't have any references or anything like that, and I'm not a scientist.
Don't worry, it's just a discussion.
Yeah, no, but so the moon is moving like 2 inches away from the Earth every year, further away. So if you like slowly rewind time, because that's what they're saying the average is, the moon gets closer and closer. So, we all know what a moon tide is, where the surf gets bigger. Well, if the moon gets closer, that moon tide gets higher. So all of a sudden the moon, like if you were to like smooth out everything around the Earth, all the land, and cover it with all water, the moon right now would create a synchronized like 200-foot tide. It's the land that breaks it up. So if you bring that closer and closer, when you go bad's going to be so big, I feel like the surf would just destroy everything on the Earth. And if the moon should be touching the Earth. So that was kind of one thing that I've seen throughout multiple different debates. And I do think that Kent Hovind had mentioned that at one point. And I do understand like a few things that Kent had said, trying to determine the age by using different radiometric methods, how, some radiometric methods, or most of them, are based on some kind of assumptions. That much, I've kind of looked into the background of that, and I can't say that he's wrong with that, so I can't disagree with that aspect of it, so.
Well, the one he loves to mess with is C14, which is because science has actually debunked that one, where it's not actually accurate after it's like either 10 or 30,000 years.
Right, so they only use it to date certain things.
Yeah, they use it to date recent stuff, whereas they use other isotopes to date further back.
Right, for sure. I mean, but I've also at the same point, even if they want to say that, or science, if they want to say that they've debunked it, I still disagree with science on that aspect, because I've seen the reports and documentations of how they did the C14 test on a living snail that dated 2,400 years old, and it was living, and it's like, that's not even possible.
No, I think it's downwards accuracy is it's got to be at least 100 years old.
No, it was 2,400 was on the report that they did with the living mollusk shell.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying though. It has to be at least 100 years dead before we get an accurate reading.
Oh, that's what you're saying. Oh, yeah. I get you. Well, yeah, so that's what was kind of interesting to me. That part I didn't know, needing to be 100 years dead, which is kind of interesting. I mean, I would wonder. I would actually like to ask the scientists, well, why is that? Why do they have to be dead? Because, I mean, in the C14 aspect of it, I mean, if we're all living it and breathing it and eating it, we should all be, for example, 1.0. So if you're dead for 2 years, you should have a little bit less, and they should be able to measure that, especially if they're going to measure back with other radiometric methods back, 14 billion years or whatever they're at now, 14 and a half billion or whatever it is.
Mm.
So, I mean, to me, dead is dead, and I wouldn't understand why it would only work at year 100 and beyond versus being deceased or living. Because if you're living, you should have the same exact C14 in you as what's in the atmosphere, right? I mean, that's kind of the whole idea of the C14 testing.
I believe so, but I do believe there are some organisms that store carbon a lot more efficiently than even the atmosphere does.
Right. And that probably makes sense. Actually, plants might be one of them, right? I mean,
Yeah, I believe so.
So, yeah, that's why it's, I guess it depends on what you're testing, where you're testing, and how you're testing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But so one of the other things that had kind of brought me to the what ifs type of scenarios that kind of brought me to the Christianity was the scientists in studying the sun, and saying that our sun is shrinking by so much every year. And if again,
Now, see, this one I've never heard before.
Yeah, so the sun burns up like so many. I don't know if it's billions or trillions of gallons of hydrogen every year, or I forget how much it is per second. But so the scientists are saying that you can watch, like if you look at the sun, you'll see it swell out and swell back, and swell out and swell back, and that swell back is what they've kind of been measuring, because so that swell back has been getting smaller over time, and so when they say that it's getting smaller, it's like, well, if you go back in time again, like the moon, that sun's going to be getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And then you have a gravitational issue where, the sun's going to be so big, the gravitational pull to me would be a lot stronger on all the planets. And it would, would we then get pulled in back in time? Is that part of the Big Bang? I don't know. Maybe, right? Is that part of the whole, everything was in a dot of nothing that exploded? Is that what scientists are trying to get to? I don't know, because if the sun got bigger, it's obviously going to have more mass and more gravitational pull. So it's going to pull everything into it, But so, yeah, no, it's definitely something to look into, I guess, if you've never heard it. I apologize. I don't have any references on that. It's just a lot of stuff that I've seen through debates, and then I've kind of Google researched and looked at how much gas the sun burns and this and that. And I mean, obviously, the sun doesn't have infinity amount of gas. It's there's a certain amount of gas in there, and it just keeps burning it. So I guess the lack of a better analogy is put a log in your fireplace and light it on fire. Eventually, it's going to get smaller and smaller and smaller, right? So that's kind of what the scientists are saying, is what's happening with the sun.
Well, see, now my understanding of astronomy is like 11th grade science, but
mine's like ninth.
I did actually take astronomy in high school.
Nice.
There's as from what I remember, is the sun is actually a fusion reactor. It's essentially a giant nuclear reactor. And I mean, that's actually one of the reasons why here, and I think it's like 11 billion years or something like that, the sun's going to go red giant on us, and we're all going to suffer heat death and die.
Interesting.
So
I haven't actually heard that.
Yeah, I don't have any sources of right offhand either, but I mean, that might be something that's like not necessarily a competing theory, that because like I said, I've never heard of the sun getting smaller. I've always been told that it was going to get, it was going to go boom.
Another Big Bang.
No, not a Big Bang. It was basically, it's going to go red giant and eventually go supernova.
Right. Yeah. And then, yeah, that'll be
long after we're gone.
Yeah. No wonder why NASA wants to get out of here, right? Head off to Mars.
Yeah. I don't even think we'd be safe on Mars.
I know for sure. No, we'd have to find a whole nother system.
Yeah.
So just out of curiosity, so I see you in the background. Do you see me in the background, or is it just my photo?
No, I just see your photo.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if I had video going because I thought I gave it access, but I wasn't sure. I didn't know how that worked. First time actually ever doing the video chat stuff.
Not a problem. Like I said, I can't even live stream, so we're on even footing on it when it comes to understanding this stuff.
Yeah, no, totally cool, man. It's yeah, because I remember watching that debate with G-Man. You know, he'd cut off, the screen would go black, then it would come back.
Yep.
And
I did figure out how to do the green screen background though.
yeah, that's pretty awesome.
So,
I've got a buddy of mine that I could ask him if you would like. So he plays a game called PUBG Mobile. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of it, but so he streams his games, and he uses some app to stream it. And the platform allows him to stream to. He does Facebook right now, but you could do like Facebook, YouTube, all the different stuff.
mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think it's a free app, and then you can pay for certain features, which you might not even need. Like you can put a delay on the video feeds and stuff like that. So when you're streaming a live game, you can put like a 4-minute delay. That way people don't know where other people are on the maps.
Well, that'd be
But
interesting.
yeah, so what I'll do is since I have your email, I'll ask him what platform he uses, and then I'll send you a link to it.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean the only thing I'm familiar with Zoom, and I think I've done StreamYards or Streamlabs once or twice. So.
Gotcha. Actually, Streamlabs sounds pretty familiar.
Yeah, I think that's what they used right after Google Plus went down.
Gotcha.
So.
So yeah, I mean, honestly, that was kind of the majority of the stuff, you know, that kind of started me pushing in that direction. But then I look at stuff like the Grand Canyon, you know, and then I try to look at, and I always try to have an open mind. You know, I always try to have like you know, I look at the Christian worldview, but I also look at, you know, a secular worldview, and I try to see, okay, this scientist says that, this Christian scientist says that, and to me, when it comes to the Grand Canyon, I don't know all the ins and the outs, but from what I've seen through debates about the Grand Canyon, and like Mount St. Helens and all that, kind of doing a small model of the Grand Canyon. To me, I think that the Christian worldview made more sense because my brother and his family has all gone to the Grand Canyon. I'm actually looking forward to going to the Grand Canyon at some point. It'd be awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Just so I can kind of do more personal fact checking, you know, on the stuff that I've seen. But you know, so through all the different strata and layers of strata that are there, you know, so one point that the Christian scientists bring up is that there is no erosion marks between the different strata, you know. So it's not like it was laid down and stayed there for till the next level of strata came on, and not once did it rain in between the levels of strata for any type of erosion. Yeah, I mean, you would expect that there'd be erosion marks if it took millions of years for the Grand Canyon to be built the way that it was. And like, so secular scientists say that, you know, the Colorado River carved that out, but I have a hard time believing that based on back to the whole Kent Hovind idea
Mm-hmm.
of where the river enters the canyon, how it enters the canyon like 4,000 feet below the peak of the canyon. Like, you know, at that point, the Colorado River would have to go up over the mountain and then carve it back down through, you know, to get back down to where it is. So to me, it's like, how could a river carve out, you know, even if the river punched a hole through a mountain, you know, and then continued to create that canyon, it wouldn't be able to cut out all the way up to the peak of the Grand Canyon itself. You'd have to have water to do that, you know.
Yeah.
So to me, the whole Noah's flood thing makes more sense about, you know, being flooded, and then the two like kind of huge Great Lakes that would be north of the Grand Canyon, and
Now,
then flooding out. But
just to double check, where was he putting the Grand Canyon as the starting point?
well, I don't geographically know exactly, but if you like on the north side of the Grand Canyon,
Mm-hmm.
where he was putting it is so obviously, so Noah's flood happened, waters receded, and then what was north of the Grand Canyon was two like huge lakes, which so Christian scientists have gone there. I don't know about secular scientists, but you can, I guess, see the evidence of like lake beds and stuff like that that were north of it. What would be north of there? I don't even know. I forget what states are directly north of the Grand Canyon there, but they were in the other
It'd
states
be
north of it.
Nevada.
Nevada, okay. So
Because I'm thinking in my head the Hoover Dam, and I mean that's a pretty big, up and down vertical distance there.
that is, but that's also man-made. You know what I mean?
Oh, I agree,
So
but I mean, if he's starting south of the Hoover Dam, then obviously there's going to be a huge drop. If he's going north of that, where the river probably would have started, then everything south of that's flatland.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So I don't exactly know if it was north of the Hoover Dam or not. I can't speak on that. I don't know that exact if he was that specific, but
Mm.
he was explaining that he thought and felt that the Grand Canyon was a spillway from the two lakes. Now, the two lakes that were described to be north of it were bigger than the 5 Great Lakes that we currently have. So I guess for lack of a better explanation, you get a secular scientist next to it and a Christian scientist next to it. The secular scientist says a lot of time in a little bit of water, and the Christian scientist says a little bit of time in a lot of water. And I guess to kind of second that, what the Christian scientists try to use is, back in 1980 when Mount St. Helen blew its top and backed up, what was it? I forget, Hope Lake or Crystal Lake or whatever the lake was there. And all the trees got knocked down for hundreds of acres around it. And it clogged up the lake and the streams, and it built up a lot of water there because it blocked the streams that were going out. And once all this water got built up, it found the lowest point of the barrier and it just started back cutting it. And overnight, there was like a miniature Grand Canyon that was carved out that was like 100 feet deep, just overnight from a little bit of water. And if you go back and actually look through like pictures of what this did back in the 80s, you can actually see like all the different levels of strata. It's like cutouts and carve outs that kind of look similar to the canyon. So it's like, it was kind of amazing to see how something like that just 100 feet deep could happen overnight. I think everybody went to sleep at whatever 9 p.m. Sun went down, and then when everybody woke up, there was a miniature Grand Canyon in their backyards. So it was an interesting to see that, and so I don't know. I might not have been able to see all the facts yet, but to me, based on the Grand Canyon, I think like the Christian worldview makes more sense for me right now. Totally makes, in my opinion, more sense just based on the facts that I've seen. But that is a good question about, where do these lakes start? Were they north of, the Hoover Dam and all that?
Yeah.
So is the Hoover Dam, is that elevation higher than the Grand Canyon?
If my memory serves, yes. It's the Hoover Dam is actually at the start of the Colorado River, where up there in Nevada, I mean, it powers, I believe it's all of Las Vegas. But just from that area right there is, I know they've seen, there's YouTube videos of people getting in trouble for throwing stuff off the Hoover Dam, and I mean it's a good couple of thousand feet at least.
Right. Well, the top of the Grand Canyon is like 8,200 feet, though, right? Something like that. I think it's like 8,200 feet, something like. It's like over a mile, almost 2 miles up, and that's why it kind of like.
Not 100% sure on that one, because I believe the Continental Divide is sitting at 8,900 feet.
Yeah, I don't know. From what I've seen, I think it was around like 8,200 feet, and I think the Colorado River enters at like 4,000 feet or something like that, or somewhere around there. So that's why, to me, it just was like, well, how does the Colorado River go up over the Grand Canyon Mountain to carve it out? You'd have to have a lot of water backed up, unless the Hoover Dam was never there back when this all happened, of course, and
Well,
there
yeah.
was those big lakes backed up like you and I talked about, and it did make the cutout, and then man came in and made the Hoover Dam. It could easily be something like that, but that's why, yeah. So it's really what gets me is the height of the Grand Canyon of the tallest point versus the height that the river actually enters the Grand Canyon. That's the point to me that doesn't make sense. And the Colorado River carved out the canyon. It's like, how does it carve 4,000 feet above it if water always seeps its own level in gravity? It goes downhill, not uphill. So that kind of blew my mind on that aspect of it.
Hang on just a second. Let me I'm doing a quick Google search real quick. That way I
Yeah.
can just double check.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's totally down.
Okay, showing Grand Canyon elevation 6,800 feet.
Okay, 68.
And Colorado River 5,500 feet, but that's average. The summit in I cannot even pronounce that word. It's a peak in Colorado.
No worries.
It's 14,321 feet.
Is the peak of Colorado?
Is the summit of the Colorado River.
Okay, that's where the height is above sea level?
Yes.
Okay, and what's the height of the canyon above sea level?
The Grand Canyon elevation above sea level is 6,804 feet.
Okay, so the Colorado River starts well above the Grand Canyon then?
Yes.
Huh. Then I wonder why they're saying that the Christian Scientists are saying it's like the opposite. Maybe they're going based on where it actually enters the canyon now that it's all cut out and carved out.
It could possibly be that they're using the just overall average elevation, because when you do a quick Google search, just Colorado River elevation, it says 5,500 feet, which admittedly does look like it's less. But when you actually look at the small description underneath it, it says that elevations range from sea level to the Gulf of California to 14,321 feet at the summit of this peak in Colorado.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, if the peak of Colorado is like all the way, where does the Colorado River even start, though? Does that start all the way up in friggin' like Washington, for example? And then by the time it gets to the Grand Canyon, it's a lot lower? I don't know. I think the scientists are measuring the height of the river above sea level based on where it enters the canyon. And where it enters the canyon, they're looking at the height of that canyon.
Oh, here we go. It's got a source. It's La Padre Pass Lake, which is 10,174 feet above sea level.
Okay, and how far away is that from the canyon?
That is in Colorado. That's the source of the Colorado River.
Right. No, I'm just thinking, like, is that actually, like, how far away from the canyon itself is it, though? And I totally don't dispute the fact that lake might be, 4,000 feet higher than the canyon.
Mm-hmm.
My point that they're making is that by the time that lake comes out into the Colorado River and the Colorado River reaches the entry point of the Grand Canyon, they're measuring the entry point sea level height of the Colorado River there at the entrance versus the peak there. And that's what they're...
Okay, I see where you're going. So yeah, it's not really going to help trying to get exact figures because there's so much geology and everything like that coming into play.
That comes into play, yeah, exactly. Yeah. But that's kind of the points that they made, mm-hmm. And I mean, at this point, without you and me both going out there side by side and doing our own tests, we kind of have to, listen to both sides and try to understand and combine what everybody's saying, and then kind of go, okay, what makes more sense? What do I subjectively believe in?
Yeah.
But we also probably subject our own beliefs based on our own worldviews too, which
Yeah,
is
pretty
why a
much.
lot of these, yeah, it's why these debates happen, man.
Yeah.
For sure. But yeah, so if you have you ever looked into Mount St. Helens at all in
Uh,
1980 or?
I did hear about something along those lines where they actually tested some of the, or they tried to carbon date the some of the magma that had dried up,
Yeah.
and it it sent the C14 meter off the chart where they couldn't even get a good
Reading it
age on
all.
it. Yeah.
Right. No, exactly. But so I guess if we continue the conversation on a totally different tangent,
Hmm.
you would ask me what I thought about Kent Hovind. Um, so all in all, I think I do think that he's at the end of the day, I think he's a good person. I don't think he would maliciously, I don't think he's a malicious person. And there are other things that I look into that kind of make sense to me. Like, to me, understanding when, let's see, trying to get onto a whole new subject. Want to make sure that I got all my stuff in order in my head here.
No rush.
So I don't know. Well, let's talk about fossils, right? Like the fossil record, so to speak. If
Okay.
you want to get into that a little bit. Um,
I
crap.
actually got into that with G-Man last week.
Oh, did you really?
Yes, I did.
Oh, that's so cool. I haven't even seen that yet. That's awesome.
It was, I believe, it was during one of his anti-atheism shows.
Oh, was it? Oh
Yeah.
no. Well, I'm not anti anything. I'm just pro things. I might not be pro one thing, but I'll be pro another. Doesn't mean I'm anti everything
Yeah.
else. But so yeah, like there were certain questions and stuff that actually Ken Hovind had called me on the phone and we had talked about it. And he had asked me a couple of questions about the whole quote unquote fossil records, how they put fossils side by side and say, well, these are the intermediate fossils of that one and that one. And
Hmm.
so he had asked me some questions that realistically I can't in my mind find any scientific method to be able to prove his questions, not to prove his questions, but to really prove that the scientists who line those fossils up would be correct. I don't know how they would line them up that way other than by looking at them. Because like questions that he had asked me were like, well, if you dug up bones in the dirt, could you tell me if those bones ever had a kid? And of course my answer is, well, no, I couldn't tell you that because it's dead. And then he asked, okay, well, let's say you could prove that it had a kid. Could you tell me if it had a kid that was different or slightly different? And I was like, well, no, you really can't. And then, his next questions were, could you prove that set of bones had a kid that was different that actually lived? And of course the answer is no, I can't, and so, I mean, when it comes down to a fossil record, I mean, realistically, how do they even line them up like that? I mean, you dig them up and go, this one looks similar. They put their interpretation on it and line it up and go, that one looks like that one, right? Or it has a skull that's shaped differently. I mean, just in today's world, we have children that get born, unfortunately, with, birth defects, and their heads might be shaped differently or arms might be shaped differently. But none of them have been a faster runner, or a faster thinker in that regards. So it's not like it's evolved us. It's kind of, in a sense, I guess, kind of de-evolved us.
Okay, so you're saying that so far that what we've seen currently, no mutations have given us any advantages.
Well, yeah, it's kind of like one of those things. It's like if, all right, let's say I have no proof of something, right? And I
Mm.
try to use proof of something else to then say, see, this thing that I have no proof of is fact. It happens. to me, that's hard to believe. Like when you go into, if we're going to jump into that whole evolution thing from the fossils, I mean, we totally can. I'm open for whatever the discussion turns into.
Okay.
But so I mean, if we're going to go that direction, like you are microevolution, I am microevolution, right? We're not carbon copies of either one of our parents. We're a combination of both. So we evolved. We're different,
Yes.
but we're not evolving into a different species. And like Kent Hovind, we don't see that happen. So how can we use microevolution, which is something we currently scientifically see, to prove something that we don't scientifically see, of a single-celled organism turning into a plant and a banana? Like, the problem that I have, to be honest with you, with the whole evolution thing,
Mm-hmm.
that as I got older within the last few years, that I started thinking more about it, is that there's too many symbiotic relationships in this world that one thing cannot exist without another. Like, we breathe oxygen. We have to have some type of an organism that breathes in carbon dioxide and exhales oxygen for us to breathe. And vice versa, they need an organism that can breathe in oxygen and exhale carbon dioxide for them to breathe. So, like, there's so many symbiotic relationships. And so for me to believe that a scientist is going to tell me that a single-celled organism, came out of a ball of soup from, the primordial soup, I think they use, and
Yeah,
then
that's one
that,
theory.
right. That is
I don't
one theory.
subscribe to the primordial soup theory. It's
Yeah,
I don't
right.
think that we actually have enough data to go that far back. But I have no problems with something along the lines of like panspermia, where a meteor had a bacteria on it and it crashed into the earth.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, that I haven't see when we get into that type of a different theory, then it becomes one of those, well, where did that come from, and where did that come from? And that's the whole, I guess, non-religious versus religious belief. The battle in the fight of, all these different debates is, it's the worldview. Are we just a bacteria? Does it matter? And that's when they all get into the whole morals thing. Well, if you're just bacteria, if you're just an evolution of bacteria, then how do you have, a standard moral? That's why it's tough for me to believe in macroevolution, and in the proof of that is microevolution. To me, it's just, it's, giving me an egg and asking me to swallow a horse. It's not proof. So the reason I didn't believe in a deity back in the day is because I'm a black and white kind of guy. I'm factual. I would like proof, right? If I'm going to believe in something, I want to have some type of proof. It doesn't have to be 100% proof, but I want belief beyond a reasonable doubt. And so to make me believe in microevolution from seeing small changes within the human species or different species of animals, to me is getting a gnat and swallowing a horse, because there's just no proof to me of macroevolution, from seeing pictures. You know what I mean? It's just, you can't prove to me one thing by using evidence from another thing. Like, he committed the murder with this woman over here, and he used the gloves over there from O.J. Simpson's case.
Okay.
You know what I mean? You can't. It's like two totally different cases in that aspect. And I think the whole evolution thing as well, it takes billions of years for those microevolutionary changes to take place for it to turn into another organism. And it's like, whoa. Yeah.
See, the whole thing about evolution, though, is it's not turning into another organism. It's just getting more complex.
Well, when you look at evolution, like, do you subscribe to the whole Who were you talking about earlier? You had mentioned his name. I can't think. Darwin, right? No, not Darwin. What's his name?
I think so far the only one I've mentioned is Dawkins.
Dawkins, yeah. So Dawkins believes in like Darwinism, the
Uh,
evolution.
Evolution by natural selection, yeah.
Is right. So is that what you believe in too? Because that's kind of what it goes along with.
Yes, that's basically the gist of what I accept. Um,
Because
there are a few things that
they basically show the family tree of everything coming back to one single-celled organism.
yeah, it's they've actually updated it now. It's the phylogenetic tree.
Okay, so it's on. They're on the phylogenetic tree. They've gotten away from the single-celled organism now.
Uh, I believe it's the earliest common ancestor or something like that. Now it's an acronym that they use nowadays.
So they're not. So are they not saying that everything's related then?
Oh no, they
Or
are. It's just that they haven't identified what that earliest common ancestor would be. So that they just leave it at the acronym and basically saying this is the one piece of data we're missing.
Okay, so they're saying macroevolution happens,
Yes.
even though they don't see it happen or have never seen it happen. The evidence that they have for it is just missing. So for now, they're going to use microevolution as the examples of it.
No, not really. It's okay. The one thing that I got into it with G-Man about too, what he perceives as being the first mammal. You know, it's always been shown as to be some type of like shrew-like creature, and he doesn't seem to understand the concept of, you know, it's not exactly a shrew, it's just shrew-like, as in, like, you know, it was mammalian, it was a placental mammal that gave live birth to its young, but it was tiny, rodent-like, and everything like that. And he automatically jumps into, okay, so it was a shrew, so show me how we're related to shrews. And I'm, you know, constantly trying to tell him, it's like, no, that's not how we're related to shrews. That right there is the common ancestor between us and all other mammals.
Right. So that's the common ancestor, and I get your point with that aspect of it. I guess maybe he's not so articulate enough, but so I guess what he might be asking is so then did the shrew give, if that's the common ancestor of us? So you're saying that we came from that and something else came from that. So in my mind, this is maybe where I get confused with the whole evolution thing. In my mind, that shrew would have to give birth to me and then give birth to something else.
Well, no, that what it is basically, and actually that's just the first placental mammal was a shrew. You also had the echinoderms and the monotremes and everything like that, which like, you know, platypus and I believe the echidna are examples of those. They're still egg-laying mammals. You know, they actually branched off a little bit further back than your placental mammals did. But it does actually go back into the fossil record as well. I mean, you have once you get down deep enough into the rock layers, you'll notice that you know, you stop seeing humans at the KT boundary. You stop seeing mammals at a certain depth. You'll stop seeing avians. Then, you know, once you get far deep enough down, that's when you start seeing the dinosaurs and stuff like that. Until you get down into Cambrian rock, and pretty much the only thing you're going to find are chordates, which are fish.
Right. And so, I mean, so from a biblical standpoint, I mean, you know, I know that, you know, a secular view thinks that, you know, millions of years in time, you know, made all those layers, things died off and fossilized. But, you know, for a fossil to happen, I mean, we all know that it's pretty much a fact that it has to be buried rapidly. You know, it can't be exposed to oxygen and all this other stuff to be able to fossilize something like that. And when you
it's got to be near perfect conditions.
Right. And so to have billions of fossils like this, something catastrophic would have to happen every single rock layer that you guys see for that to actually fossilize all those fossils. So there would have to be some type of catastrophic event every single, if it takes whatever, if it takes 2 million or 500 million years per layer of rock, every 500 million years there would have to be some kind of catastrophic thing to fossilize everything on the earth, or a majority of everything on the earth, and then another layer would have to get put down. So to me that's a stretch, I guess. But when I look at it from like a Noah's flood perspective, and you look into more hydrologic sorting, I feel for me that's a better example of understanding, because let's think of it like this. I don't want to get personal. So let's just say you weigh 200 pounds, right? And let's say
that's giving me plenty of
cool, awesome, good. I like the smile. So let's just say you're 200 pounds and I'm 500 pounds, right? And we go together and we stand side by side on the shoreline where the waves break over our feet. Based on my density and weight, as the waves are pulling the sands and the different layers out, I'm going to sink faster in the dirt than you would based on my density. So the whole point to a Christian worldview is, if the world is flooded, like you and I had talked about earlier, the moon tide would get to about 200 feet in pulling on the moon. So as that tide pulls across the entire surface area that's supposedly covered by water, it's going to pull all the water up by 200 feet, which is also going to hydrologic, sift like a wave would on our feet at the beach. And based on density, everything's going to start sinking. And so if the world, what was it, flooded for a year,
I believe so. That's the story I usually get. Yeah.
Right. So you have a year of doing that hydrologic sorting. It does a story like that, to me, would do multiple things. It would bury things rapidly, and it would create a condition to create fossils. Excuse me. And it would also, to me, it would explain finding clams, mollusk shells in the closed position at the top of Mount Everest. I mean, they didn't find like one or two; they found like a lot of them, at the top of Mount Everest. And you start to think of that, and it's like, holy crap! Like, how did a clam fossilize go all the way to the top of the Mount Everest? Like, what the heck? It's interesting. But so to me, hydrologic sorting makes more sense, because you look at some of these fish fossils that they found, and like their gills are spread out, like they're gasping for air, their mouths are open. It looks like it was like they were afraid, they were trying to get oxygen or something out of the water that they couldn't, probably because they were buried, in my interpretation. So I just think it, to me, makes more sense of a flood versus, millions of years, these particular types of animals roam the earth, and some type of catastrophic event created a series of events to fossilize everything that was, or a majority of everything that was living at the time. And then all of a sudden something else grew up on the next level, then dinosaurs come alive. To me, it's, I think the hydrologic sorting makes a little bit more sense. It's a little bit more simple anyways to understand the whole process. And I don't think it, I mean, I don't know how it would be able to be proven wrong, because it would be a series of events that would create those conditions. Because if you look at other fossils, like tree fossils that they found, it goes like, there's tree fossils that go up and down. There's some trees that are standing upright and some trees that are upside down that connect through different layers of strata. And I mean, we all know, if you go take dirt right now and go down to a tree and cover up like 10% of the base, it's just going to die. It's going to rot off.
Yeah.
It's so like, I personally can't look at a tree that connects multiple layers of strata together and go, well, yeah, that tree stood there for, 200 million years or 500 million years while the different layers of strata came across it. That I think the tree fossil is what pulled me away from the whole, millions of years thing, and into the catastrophic event of Noah's flood. I think the tree fossil was the one. You know how like they say, oh, this missing link, whoever it was, I forget the name of the missing link, but that Chinese guy that, basically made $50,000 off of National Geographic for making that fake fossil of the missing link, whatever it was. I forget the name of it, but.
You talking about Lucy?
No, not Lucy. It was the other one. It had like the wings and whatever. But
Are you okay? You're talking about the missing link between humans and apes, or birds and dinosaurs?
Yeah, it was birds and dinosaurs. I was just
Okay,
using
so
that as the example.
Archaeopteryx.
Archaeopteryx. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I remembered it as you started saying it.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's like one of those things. It's like, when I look at a tree going through multiple layers of strata, it's like, well, the tree, there's no way that tree could stand there for millions of years while different layers of strata built up around it, and it's not like one tree. There's, many different trees that it happened to. And then why would one tree be upside down going through the strata and one be right side up? To me, that's like the tree being ripped out of the ground and fumbled around and then buried.
Sorry, go back to this Archaeopteryx thing, because this is now the second or third time I've heard this. You're saying a Chinese man found it?
The story that I had heard about Archaeopteryx was that Archaeopteryx was a fraud, that it was, part of it was casted and created by some, I don't know if he was Chinese or whatnot, maybe Asian, somewhere over in that area of the world, and they sold it to like National Geographic for like $50,000 or whatever. And then National Geographic had put out kind of like an apology letter, so to speak, for saying, yeah, we were frauded on the whole Archaeopteryx thing.
Okay, so this is the one back in 1985, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you aware that they actually found one like 20 years, or like a few years before Darwin died, that was basically the same thing?
Nope.
Yeah,
you're talking back in the 1800s.
Yeah, this was Darwin. Darwin predicted that we would find a transitional species between birds and dinosaurs, or essentially a bird with unfused wing fingers.
Right.
And 20 years after he made that prediction, they found it, and it was Archaeopteryx. I mean, I can understand this one right here. The one that I'm looking at is apparently this particular fossil was challenged as a hoax, but
so then
the
how do you go? So dinosaurs to birds. No, and I get you. So I've got nothing. I don't know anything about. So yeah, I don't mean to cut in. I totally don't know anything about the fossil you're talking about. 20 years after he died or whatever. I've never heard about that fossil. That fossil's never been used as proof, to my knowledge, of being a transitional fossil in the record that I can remember. I only remember the one back in 1985 there, the Archaeopteryx.
Yeah, the Archaeopteryx fossil was supposed to be a transitional fossil. It was challenged multiple times by the creationist community. Where it was finally, I believe they finally ruled that it was in fact a bird, because the creationist community just absolutely refused to acknowledge the fact that it was a dinosaur.
So, right. So question for you though,
Mm-hmm.
Obviously we have two different worldviews. So I would like to try to understand your view better on how a dinosaur would turn into a bird. Like, I guess I'm so confused, because I think, it's like, to me, over the course of, my upbringing with evolution,
Mm-hmm.
They try to use, again, small changes, in a certain species that creates big changes over time. So was it is it something I know it might sound silly, but would it, for example, a velociraptor eventually grow one feather on its arm, and then eventually the bone structure would change, and then a second feather comes out on the next birth? I don't understand. Does it go 1%, 2%, 3%, 2.5%, or does it go 100%? I gave birth to a whole nother animal. Like at some point, is there like a half a wing and a half a arm that's not useful? I mean, I just don't really understand the idea behind, one kind of an animal evolving into another kind. Like do they come out with one wing and one arm? And I'm
Okay.
not trying to be fallacious. I'm not trying to be rude or mean. I just truly don't understand.
Okay. So you're having issues with the entire concept of transition.
Totally
Okay.
big time. I mean, when you go from scales to feathers, I know that they have the same chemical compounds.
It's all
don't.
keratin.
Right, and I totally get that. But you're also talking solid bone versus hollow bones. There's a lot of differences, and that's my question is like how many differences are supposed to happen
Well, see, the
throughout
thing
the
is
transitions to get to that bird?
when you're talking about transitions, one thing that we have noticed a lot of, especially with regards to a lot of your predatory dinosaurs, um, they have actually uncovered a number of fossils here recently, like in the last 10, 15 years, where you actually see feather patterns behind the bone in the rock. So we have actually concluded that Jurassic Park is not exactly what dinosaurs used to look like. They actually did have feathers.
Which some dinosaurs did, or
Some dinosaurs had feathers. Others had scales.
have
Like
they been able to determine which dinosaurs had the feathers?
yes, most of your raptor type birds, or most of your
like the velociraptors.
velociraptors, Deinonychus, Compsognathus. The T-Rex had probably plumage, not necessarily feathers. A lot of your large carnivorous birds. I mean, a lot of your large carnivorous dinosaurs.
All right.
Now, however, there are some like the mosasaur, large sea creature type dinosaur. That was a slightly different line where if you go further down in the complexity of that one, you end up with modern day crocodiles.
Yeah.
Okay. But no, a lot of your carnivorous or raptor-like dinosaurs, I should say, are have descended into avians, and the thing about that is one of the main things that they found was bone density. Like you said, it was how do you go from hollow bone to solid bone, or solid bone to hollow bone?
Vice versa. Yeah.
Well, they actually figured that out. What it was is a lot of the bone channels that they've actually dug up in these fossils recently. They've actually had enough to where they could actually cut them open and show you the actual density of these bones. And if you actually look at a core sample of these bones, you'd notice that it's not near as dense as you would expect it to be. They're actually now speculating. I believe the T-Rex. When we were growing up, I think they had it clocked at like 35 tons. And now they're trying to say that it's it was barely 20.
Right.
I mean, still same size, but somehow it's lost half its weight.
Right. Skinny. It's a skinny Rex.
But that's what they're saying is apparently the avian line of the phylogenetic tree. Apparently, what it was back in that area right before mammals decided to come into play. You ended up with these giant super predator birds that or dinosaurs that were able to prey on each other, and then luckily you had the catastrophe that caused the majority of the larger versions of them to go extinct, which allowed the mammals to adapt and grow and become bigger without so much fear of being able to avoid that T-Rex.
Right. So I'm almost wondering too. I mean, when we talk about dinosaurs and get back into that whole realm of things, back during that time frame, the oxygen content, so the oxygen level was much higher.
Yes.
So that's why the bigger animals and lizards and insects could live easily. I don't know exactly what changed. Why, what was it, like 32% oxygen then to like 20% oxygen now? Almost a 12% difference in oxygen level, something along those lines. I mean, I don't have the exact documentation in front of me, but
Yeah, it's somewhere in there. Yeah, we'll go
yeah,
with that.
it's something like that. I wonder what created that difference in oxygen levels.
Well, it's not necessarily the oxygen level itself. It could have easily been a volcanic eruption or a comet hit, or sorry, meteor strike that caused an explosion of other gases to be in the atmosphere.
Right, and take up some of the place of oxygen. That's kind of what
Yes,
you're thinking.
because I mean, they
So
just recently had a volcano go off a few years ago that caused our greenhouse gases to go from basically where it was to all of a sudden this volcano goes off, and now we're like 10 years away from extinction.
right. So I mean, I can kind of understand, the velociraptor dinosaurs had feathers versus just scales. So I can kind of understand that aspect of things.
And I mean, if you look at it, even modern day birds, if you look at like their legs and the skin around their beaks, that does actually appear to be scales.
Yeah. Trying to think, like we were talking about Dawkins a little bit earlier. There was a Dawkins video that I saw. He was going over the whole still within the realm of evolution. Was it Betsy the cow turning into the whale eventually? It was something along those lines. Where
okay, yeah, it was
basically
some kind of large terrestrial animal, basically going back into the ocean and becoming
a whale,
yeah.
right? And so, like, I guess one of the hard things I have trying to understand this is, like, so the animal that they use, for lack of better knowledge of exactly what the name is, I'm going to use cow.
Okay.
All right, because they have the same basic kind of features where they have an esophagus where they breathe through and eat through. Whereas whales have two totally different orifices. They have one for breathing and one for eating. So they can actually breathe while they swallow and eat.
Yeah.
And so, like, how does a transition that? How do you get two different orifices? Like, do you get born with that? Like, is that 100% intact, born, ready to go? Like, there's a macro change. Like, the mom has an esophagus, breathes and eats through it while she's swimming in the water, and gave birth to her child that has two different, it has a blowhole and an esophagus. Like, how does a transition into two different, tubes happen? That is like way beyond my understanding.
Okay, that right there would be along the lines of guided evolution. Obviously, they learned how to swim, or I should say, they relearned how to swim before anything else. And as the generations went down, obviously the legs would become a little bit more useless, so they would have adapted the fins, everything like that. Even in modern day whales, we still see signs that they actually do still have back feet. They're just absolutely useless. And at the same time, because
Wait, are you talking about their hips?
yeah, the pelvis and the residual bones that are in their back fins.
Yeah, those aren't like useless though. Those are used for reproduction muscles.
The muscles are, but the bones aren't.
Yeah, they attach to those bones. So I mean, they can't be vestigial if you have like those bones are kind of like a pivoting point for them. I mean, I don't think they're vestigial based on the fact that they're used for reproduction and repositioning, helping the muscles reposition their reproductive parts.
Well, no, because there are actually whales that are being born without them. That's what vestigial is. It's it's the same reason why every now and then we have a human that still ends up with a tail.
Well, I would love to have a tail, man. Are you kidding me? Carry a bag of groceries in each hand and open the door.
Oh yeah, a prehensile tail would be nice, but generally what we end up with is the little like extra vertebrae off the end of our spine that just kind of wags every now and then.
For sure. Only when we're happy, right?
But going into how the nostrils essentially became a blowhole, it would have been essentially the same thing. Basically, as the generations came by, they would have adapted, and the
yeah, but I guess so for me, I like in my position. All right, so I can kind of swallow the fact. All right, they go into the water and they learn how to swim, and eventually they evolve. Their feet turn into flippers, which to me is still mind-boggling. But to get one orifice to turn into two, I mean, it's not like in my mind, it's not like that can happen by 25%, and it still be functional. And then, or happen, where it starts to change by 13%, where you have two openings that go into the same tube now. And then the next baby has, two openings that go into the same hole, but the length of them, of where they enter into the same hole, is different. Like how many minuscule changes until you get two completely separate orifices? Like, does it happen in one generation where the next one's born with it? Or does it happen over a period of time?
No, okay, I see what you're saying. Now, unless it's some weird freak mutation, then it's not going to happen in a single generation. So, I mean, it's literally hundreds of thousands of generations before essentially, I'm just going to go ahead and point to myself here, but basically, my nose is at the end of my face, and if in order for me to have my great 20,000 generations down the line, in order for me to have my descendants go from having their nose here to having it up on top of their head, would require selection. Okay.
So essentially, by selection, you mean that having the nose on the front of your head is not kind of survival of the fittest, so to speak. Like, you're not the strongest, so you might die off because you're not able to survive in the environment because the nose is on the front of your head, versus it being transitioning up your forehead, for example, eventually up to the top of your head.
Exactly. Basically, what I'm trying to say is evolution follows environment, but it's not like it's water where it just runs exactly the way environment goes. No, environment changes, then evolution has to change with it. So it's a very, very slow process.
Okay.
That's adaptation.
Right. And which leads me to, still have, questions. Like, they found mosquitoes, right? Mm-hmm. So if we kind of flip back to dinosaurs, and this is how I figured out the whole oxygen thing and blah, blah, blah. Because like in the amber, they found oxygen, in the amber. And that's how they tested to get the higher level of oxygen content. Mm-hmm. But they've also found mosquitoes, in there. And so I started doing a little bit of investigation on like mosquitoes and the average lifespan of a mosquito, being male or female. And I mean, you're talking 14 days versus like 30 days. And if you think of all the mosquitoes in the world, I think I looked at like Alaska, and there was some crazy number, like in the trillions for Alaska of just mosquitoes.
Yeah.
But you think of like those trillions, and like, you don't even go into trillions. You just do like round numbers and do like 100,000 mosquitoes, So in 14 days, the one mosquito dies off. So before they die off, they have to mate and create new mosquitoes. So I mean, if they're replicating, and you're talking every 14, or let's say go by a female every 30 days, so they're every 30 days. So every month there's more mosquitoes being born. If you do that math, I mean, that's trillions upon trillions, like to the 10th power of different generations of mosquitoes since dinosaurs, but mosquitoes have still stayed the same. So you're talking a totally different environment back when the dinosaurs were living versus now when we're living. And mosquitoes have stayed the same. So is what you're saying meaning that natural selection, basically, for lack of better terminology, thinks that the mosquito is perfect for both conditions?
I wouldn't say it's perfect for both conditions. I would say that the mosquito is perfectly adapted to whatever environment that it lives in. I mean,
Right. No,
obviously, you're not going to find a whole lot of mosquitoes in Siberia, but that's
no,
just
for sure.
that's just
But I'm
because they freeze.
talking, what, dinosaurs were, 65 million years ago or whatever it was now? Or
Yes.
so my point is for 65 million years, mosquitoes have never done macroevolution over the
Oh
course
no,
of
they have.
65 million years.
They have.
Like,
There's plenty of speciation events in insects.
but there's speciation events, but it's not like they're still mosquitoes, though, is my point. It's
Well,
not
yeah,
like
they're never
it's
going to
not
be a
like the
non-mosquito. I mean, that's just like the
but
easiest way to describe that is basically humans are apes as part of the I believe it's the old world apes.
right.
We are primates. We are mammals.
But my point, though, is if you reverse time,
Mhm.
at one point in the discussion, you and I said that there was one species that created everything on this planet.
Yes.
So if you go back far enough in time, that one thing is everything. So
yes.
So then why is it that one thing can be everything, but the next thing can't turn into something else?
Okay, it's basically divergence. I have two kids. Obviously, if my youngest inherited, say, my skill with math, and my oldest inherited my skill with reading.
Right.
Okay. If you get 10 generations down the line without any mitigating factors deteriorating on either side, then the one that's got the skill with math is going to have let's not use skill, how about understanding? The one who's got the understanding with math
works.
is going to be still have that understanding of math, and the one that's
Right.
got the literary understanding is going to have
and that's because he has the genetic information for that understanding.
Yes.
So I totally get where you're going with that, and where I'm going with that is not forward in time.
Mhm.
I'm trying to look at what we have today and use your process and reverse it billions of years ago when the first organism was there, right? So
Yes.
if we look at how many species do we have in this planet today, there's something like
hundreds
16
of thousands.
million.
Yeah,
I think it's like 16 million different types of species across the planet. Some crazy number.
I can go
right?
with that. Yeah, millions of species. Okay.
So if you take all those different genetic informations,
Mhm.
right? So you have to and you rewind all those back in the evolutionary process in reverse style.
Yeah.
All that information has to be present in that one organism that created everything, because you have to have the original. Even if it's a mutation, you have to have the original information there for that information to mutate into whatever it mutates in down the road. Like the information still has to be present for it to mutate, because if the information isn't there, then it can't mutate information that's not there, right?
Okay, you have to have the original information.
Right.
Anything else that is either added or taken away is a mutation.
Well, correct. Mutations can change things. I totally get that. But I guess what I'm saying is all that original information has to come all the way back to the one original organism.
Yes.
So with that one original organism, if you think of all the 16 million different species or whatever that exact number is worth of information and mutations,
Mm-hmm.
to bring that all the way back to one organism, that organism has to be one heck of an organism to be able to hold all of that type of information, all the original information to create everything on this planet.
Or it could just be one very simple organism.
Now, why do you think simple?
Oh, because the further you go back, the simpler stuff gets. And that's basically the principle of evolution. the reason why we can say that we are related to, that animals and plants are related is
Okay.
because they both share the same type of cells.
Right. And that's based off of mutations, right?
No, it's just that's the classification that we gave the cell. It's a eukaryote.
Right. It's a eukaryote, but so to have different plant types, you have to have some type of mutation from the original plant type to turn into two different plant types. And then from 2 to 4 or 2 to 6, like there has to be some series of mutations at every different species level to create and eventually change into another species. And sometimes there might have to be whatever 100,000 mutations to create one new species, right? So, but my question is, I guess, when we get into start talking about mutations, is what mutation have scientists been able to prove that is a beneficial mutation that helps something better than what everything else that's related to it does? Like if I grew a third arm, would I be able to swing a bat better? For example, I know it's a crazy example because it's a third arm, but it would be a mutation. Like, so what type of a mutation have scientists found that are actually beneficial to any type of organism that helps it better than all the rest of its organisms, to where natural selection would eventually kill off all the rest and allow that one mutation to carry on? Like, have scientists ever been able to find any mutation that's an actual beneficial mutation? Because the only mutations that I've ever seen, for example, are not good mutations. That, like having a gene in our one of our chromosomes mutated would not be a good thing. You know what I mean? So like, what kind of a
Referring to like
mutation
Down
would be?
syndrome and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really want to get to that aspect of it. I was trying to be
Okay.
more, just general, because I didn't want to classify anything as a negative mutation. I'm just saying there's a lot of mutations in general that that I know of that are just not good mutations. And usually, like, if we did not, as humans, intervene to protect those with those mutations, they would die off from natural selection. So, like, what type of a mutation is beneficial that we wouldn't protect? Have scientists
Uh,
found that?
Actually,
And it could be in any organism.
the easiest one that I can think of pertaining to humans, at least, is hexadecimalism. You know what that is?
Nope,
Uh,
couldn't tell you.
6 fingers.
6 fingers?
Yeah.
Okay. I kind of had a general guess, but the 6-fingered man, the Princess Bride.
Yep.
Are we gonna watch that movie later?
Actually, I might actually have that around here somewhere.
Right, it's somewhere, right?
But no, the hexadecimalism is it's actually a dominant gene. If somebody with 6 fingers has kids, those kids will have 6 fingers.
Right, they have the gene for it, for sure. I mean, the gene's there, but once the gene's not there, it's not there, right? I mean, it's possible. So let's say that person has a kid with 6 fingers.
Yes.
And that kid marries somebody that has 5 fingers. Is that, and then those kids have kids, but their kids come out with 5 fingers. Does that mean they don't have the gene anymore?
No.
Or does that mean it's there,
that means
but it's
that
dormant?
wouldn't happen. That's the problem.
It wouldn't happen.
No,
Okay.
if a person has 6 fingers and they have kids with a person with 5 fingers, the 6 fingers is gonna win out. It is literally that dominant of a gene.
Okay. And so how is having an extra finger a beneficial mutation, just out of curiosity? I'm not saying that it's not. I'm just curious I'm sure there's a lot of things we could think of, that we could probably laugh about to make it beneficial, but I don't want to go down that road either.
No, the thing is it depends on where the finger is. A lot of your hexadecimalism is it's actually a cross between a thumb and your index finger. It's like right there in the middle of your hand.
Right.
And
is it a stronger grip? I mean,
yes,
I don't.
It does lead to a stronger grip. There's a lot of different ways it can help, but like.
So how many of those changes would it have to be made, or how many different mutations like that would have to be made to a human for it to be considered a different species, no longer human?
Okay, see, that's where evolution kind of throws it for a loop. Once something is something, it's not going to be anything but that. Okay, it's basically as soon as mammals split
But
off between.
We evolved from apes, though, right?
Yes, no,
Okay.
we're still apes, though. That's the thing. We evolved from apes. We are still apes. Apes evolved from mammals. We are still mammals. Mammals evolved from the scientific name for certain types of reptiles. I forget what that's actually called, but we still share the characteristics of that.
We share characteristics, yes, but we call them apes and us humans because we're different species, right?
That's
whether we came from them or not, we're different species. Is my point.
Not
kind of, it is. I mean, that's why we call us humans and them apes.
Well, we call us humans because we're actually cocky enough to think that we're more important than them.
But on a speciation
level, we are hominid. They are. I don't remember what but yeah, they're.
So they're different. My point being is that they're just a different species because
yes,
eventually we had so many mutations. I'm not a believer that we came from apes. I know that you are, and that's cool. Mm-hmm. I'm fine. But so if we came from apes, and that's why I say if, just because of my lack of belief, is we eventually had so many mutations that we are now classified as a different level of species than what the apes are, the orangutans or whoever the closest relative was.
Chimpanzee.
Chimps, okay. But that's my question is how many more of those six-finger mutations are required for him to be considered something different?
Well, that's the thing. He's still going to be a hominid.
Yeah, he'll still be a hominid, but a different species for speciation purposes is what I'm getting. Yeah,
once we get there, then we got to basically redo the entire phylogenetic tree. So it's basically the phylogenetic tree right now. We're trying to get everything caught up. That way, once we do have a speciation event, we can label it correctly.
Right. And I get that. I mean, do they have any idea how many of those types of mutations would have to happen? Because, I mean, we already know what species, the apes are and what we are, hominids versus what they are. And have they figured out how many mutations have had to happen between apes and humans for us to turn and evolve into humans to become a different species? And that's my question is how many more mutations, if we know that answer, how many more mutations would it take for a six-finger guy to become a different species? And how many, and that's, I mean, having a six-finger gene, wouldn't a mutation have to take over the entire population for it to be beneficial, though? I mean, thinking about it.
No, it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to take over the entire population to be beneficial. It just has to be beneficial. I mean, there's a kid. There's a kid who's got a mutation over in. I think it's one of the Koreas or Cambodia or something like that. Who can he's actually got a genetic mutation where he can see in pitch black.
He can what?
He can see in pitch black. I mean, like literally, his eyes are better than cat's eyes.
Oh, that's pretty interesting. I mean, I can see how that would be beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely save on the electricity bill.
They actually did put him to the test. He could actually read a book in the middle of the dark.
No, it's pretty interesting for sure. But that's what I mean. Like, so how does this happen? Like, would that kid have to like grow up and marry somebody that has six fingers? Because then you would have a kid that has six fingers and can see in the dark. Like, is that how this speciation happens?
That's if that can see in the dark is a dominant gene or not. Because I mean, this kid's like I think 12 or 13 at this point now. He's obviously not having sex anytime soon.
Right.
I mean, it depends on how the gene dominance takes place as well. I mean, because obviously, if you get this kid who can see in perfect clarity in pitch black, then he turns around and has a kid, and none of his kids show that sign, then I guess it wasn't a dominant gene.
Right. And so I can understand how like speciation can happen and how nothing, so you kind of say nothing will turn into another kind, right? Like mosquitoes will always be an insect kind, for example. Like it will never turn, like a mosquito will never turn into a totally different organism.
Yeah, I think like one of G-Man's favorite things, or even Ken Hoven's favorite things, is show me a dog that turns into a non-dog.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's definitely it.
Uh,
Yeah, I think G-Man got that from Hoven, and yeah,
yeah.
Hoven definitely started that.
So
I mean,
the
I
thing
guess where
is if somebody could show you that, it would completely disprove evolution.
right, yeah, no, because evolution is small changes over a long period of time. I
Yeah,
totally get that, um, and
but
that's kind
like,
of my question is like so to me, um, that's where I mean, I kind of agree in a sense with maybe like G-Man and Hoven and maybe others in their genre of thinking of like, we believe in a deity, in a creator that created everything, whereas I feel like anybody who believes in evolution has to believe that that is possible over billions of years that we were never able to observe. We have to take what we can see, small changes today, and apply it in our kind of, lack of a better term, in our imagination of understanding and thinking that, well, if these little changes could happen, then they could eventually add up to all these big changes and change into another kind. So to me, it has to be on a belief scale on the evolution side as well, because I don't think we've had the proof in evolution of observation to be able to scientifically prove that. And that right there is one of the reasons why I was always kind of skeptical about the evolution. But I was, again, before I kind of decided my worldview, I was skeptical of everything and I questioned everything.
okay.
Um, but, without having, I mean, obviously, if I could prove to you that the Christian God existed, you would have 100% proof that he existed, and you would not have to believe in him. You know what I mean? Like, I believe in a God. I believe in the Christian God,
Mm-hmm.
um, because it's a belief. I think that there's enough facts for me to believe that it's true, and that's where I get at, like with the whole micro changes, adding, and changing into different, species and this and that, and creating all these different kinds. Is, to me, it's like it's still. I mean, it's not a deity, so it's not really a religious belief, but it's a belief that you guys have enough evidence of small changes that would create big changes in the past that we have never observed yet, in the future or present. Because we've never really seen these little changes, of, for example, one mammal eventually turning into another kind of mammal. We've seen it with insects where, there's like 100 different styles of ladybugs, but they all have the same genetic information. Just some have more dominant genes than others, kind of like the 6-finger dominant gene versus the 5-finger gene.
Yeah.
The guy with 6 fingers is still human. He just has a different dominant gene than we do.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I kind of think like there's still a belief level on the evolution side of things. I mean, do you agree or disagree with that, or are you totally welcome to comment
Okay.
if you want?
What I see on that is because I was actually kind of skeptical about that as well recently. There was actually a paper published that showed multiple interminglings between humans and Neanderthals. Like, I think it's something like 8 or 9% of the population has Neanderthal DNA in it.
Yep.
But using how we can figure that out, basically using that same formula, they were able to determine that Neanderthals actually intermingled specifically one time with Denisovians. And Denisovians were another subhuman or proto-human ape. And what it was is given the given the actual population genetics that they actually they factored in, it's like 8% have Neanderthal DNA in it, and it's like 0.2% or something like that have Denisovan DNA in it. And just the way that the way that I see it is science. Science is the best explanation of how we can know what happened, and the easiest way to prove it right is by making the predictions that it has. Okay, like we talked about Darwin. He predicted that they would find a bird with unfused wingtips if birds did indeed evolve from a reptilian ancestor. And 20 years after that, they were digging up they ended up digging up the first Archaeopteryx. It was literally exactly what they were looking for, and nobody would have bothered even thinking about it unless using the scientific method it had actually been predicted.
So I don't disagree with you about making predictions at that level of things. Mm-hmm. Because I mean, if you read, not that you have to, I'm sure you already, know a lot of the stories from the debates and stuff that you do, but from the Christian Bible perspective, if you read through some of the stories that might sound like fairy tales, right? Like the Noah's flood, you can make predictions based on that story. Like, oh, well, if there's a flood, I bet that you would find, deposits of oil and fossils and all this other stuff that would be found in the ground. So both, like, I'm not trying to discredit the fact that you can make scientific predictions with a secular worldview, but you can also make scientific predictions with a Christian worldview or any religious probably worldview. And it's not about predictions, because at the end of the day, I can make predictions like we would find fossils based on the flood, hydrologically sorted, like you and I had spoke about. And I could say, well, see, we scientifically proved it right, so the Bible's right. Versus, Darwin making a prediction, well, we should find this type of a fossil if evolution is true. And it just so happens there's that fossil, so he's evolution is true. And that's where it comes into the whole kind of like, well, I'm right and you're wrong, and I'm right and you're wrong, so to speak. And that's really not what I want to, I really don't want to go down that type of a road, because I think it's kind of an endless type of road, mm-hmm. At some point. My point is just being that both sides of the fence can easily make scientific predictions. But at the same point in time, there has to be some level of belief. I mean, if we weren't there to witness it and observe it and see it and study it over the course of that amount of time, and in all fairness, science is, scientific technologies are very recent. A lot of them, most of them. Yeah. So the science world itself has not had enough time, and I get that, to study over that length of period of time to be able to prove that macro changes can happen. They're only able to study micro changes and make the predictions based on that study that it did happen. And that's my kind of point, is that no matter which side of the fence you're on, there has to be some type of level of belief that it's possible, and you base that belief on predictions that you make from the theories that each side has. Like my theory would be, for example, the Christian Bible. I believe that is true. That's the word of God, and it's a theory. It's one of 4,200 different religions, and so reading through a biblical Bible of any different type of religion, is just some type of a theory, on origin of life. I mean, every religion has some type of an origin of life, which is a theory on the origin of life. And that's what evolution is the origin of life. It's part of, because I mean, when we talk about evolution, we're just talking about organism evolution. And at one point you mentioned, well, a meteor came down and possibly, hit the earth and it had bacteria on it, and then we grew from there. Where some other people might have the view of the Big Bang, from the dot of nothing that exploded. So those are all different types of
that's getting into
theories.
cosmological evolution.
But
I mean,
everything, my point just being, and I know that totally gets into another topic that we don't even need to get into right now, but that's my point of evolution. There's many different levels of evolution of, and every different topic tries to get to a point of a worldview of origin of life. Evolution explains how we got here based on our origin, where we originally came from, right? And my Bible does the same thing, and another person's, the Catholic Bible does the same thing, and the Judaism does the same thing, and like all different religions do the same thing. They have an origin, and that's basically what we're getting at. But every different worldview has an origin of life worldview, but like I said, in all fairness, I don't think science has had enough time. Like the Christian Bible is what, 6,000 years old, something 4,000. It's old. The stories are dated back there.
I think the story of Job is 2,400 years old.
Yeah, I mean, if you add up, it's one of those things where, like, if you go back into Genesis and just add up all the ages of all the people of when this person begat that person and create a genealogy, you get back to about 6,000 years of just genealogy. So that's kind of why I use the Bible 6,000 years old. I mean, I'm not putting a definitive date exactly. Oh, it's 6,000 years, 1 day, and 2 hours old. Like, I'm not doing that. I'm just saying it's generally that old. And my point to you is that science hasn't had 6,000 years to perform all their studies, right? In documentation and all that. They've only had a few hundred years, really. So that's why I kind of think it's more of a belief based on looking at the micro.
Well, I mean, science really doesn't. Science actually, yeah, it's had an inception a certain way, but I mean, the main concept of science is, well, how did that happen?
Correct. Yep.
And instead of saying, well, the spirit of, this, I believe one of the memes that's going around now is, religion was designed when the first caveman wondered what happened, or where thunder came from, or something like that. It's
we all know that's Thor. I mean, come
exactly.
on.
And it's to me, science has always been one of those. Well, how does that work? And instead of saying, well, it just does, it's let's find out. So I mean,
yeah, no, science is. I totally agree with you. Science is knowledge. I definitely agree with you to find out. And honestly, the Christian Bible tells us that it wants us to find out. It tells us, I forget the exact scriptures and the exact wording, but it tells us to definitely investigate, do scientific studies, figure it out.
Yeah, see,
it doesn't want us to
I've
just
seen it
believe on
contradict
that.
itself so many times, though, because
On what
there's
aspect?
there's verses that tell you to investigate, and then there's verses that specifically say that thou shalt not question, the Lord, and then there's verses that says, I think.
Well, I mean, that's kind of so in my worldview, that's kind of no different than, hypothetically speaking, I'm putting you in the position of God and your kids as us. That, like, you giving a law, thou, so the thou shall not do this, but thou shall study that. That's like you saying, do this, but don't do that. It's you laying down the law for your family, and all of us under God's eyes are his family, his kids. So he's kind of giving us.
My kids are 10 and 12. I always get, but why?
Well, that's the free will side of it. See,
yeah.
See, you're dealing with what he deals with, but with 7 billion people on the planet. So, no, I totally, I totally enjoy talking to you too, man. Like, it's so easy to talk to. I just want you to know that ahead of time.
I appreciate that.
And I totally thank you. Like, so if you post this live, I just want everybody to know. As soon as I got his email, he responded the same day, and got back to me the same day, and we are talking together on the same day. He literally made time to talk. Like, he's very responsive. Sometimes we all get busy and he might not be able to respond right away, but if anybody wants to talk to him, he is very responsive and definitely plans on making time for whoever wants to talk. But I just wanted to get that out there because you've been a pleasure talking to, for sure.
Oh, I definitely appreciate that. I know you've got a meeting here in about 20 minutes, right?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
So I kind of have to start getting ready for that.
Okay.
And it's really not even a meeting. It's more of other people relying on me to be there. It's totally a video game. I'll be honest. It's definitely a video game. But we actually have it's not even playing the game itself. We're playing private scrims. So it's like a bunch of different teams versus our clan's team. And it's kind of bragging rights sort of thing. And I'm part of this new clan, and they asked me to be there, and I said, yeah, no problem. And I totally honestly didn't expect to even be able to speak with you tonight. But I'm glad we totally were able to, and
well, I mean, the only thing I have to do so far is build a house for my roommate. She plays Minecraft, so that's not very complicated.
Nice. That's pretty awesome. Well, cool. So again, hey, thanks for all your time. How long have we been even talking right now? I don't even know. Probably a good hour at least.
It's like an hour and a half now.
Yeah, there we go. It's not bad, man. It was a good discussion for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But so I guess in a conclusion, on my end of things, I can totally understand where you come from. And I just want you to know that there are Christians out there that understand where you come from. Because, like I said, I used to be there, and I've kind of come around, and you've actually helped me understand a little bit deeper on the whole evolution side of things, and the mindset of somebody who believes and understands and why evolution is the scientific process that they believe in. So appreciate that for sure.
No, I appreciate it too. Like I said, I can kind of understand where you're coming from, at least a little bit better than I did G-Man, because that boy's all over the place. But
I like G-Man. He is a little all over the place, but he's very passionate.
Yes, he gets worked up so easily.
Yeah, his passion, I think, might overtake him a little bit to where he can't be as articulate with the things that he means or wants to say, but he means well.
Mm-hmm.
And I know he wishes everybody well for sure. But yeah, no, I do watch G-Man. I totally got to watch that other video that you did.
I think I
did it with. Was it with G-Man? Was it on his channel?
It was on his GTV channel, I believe. It ended up me arguing with him, Von Helton, Beckel, and Shroom Pearson.
All right, yeah, I'll have to check that video out for sure. But yeah, and that's. So I'm glad that you have a better understanding of where I come from, for sure. Because in my eyes, no matter which world view you come from, there's some level of belief. There has to be. Otherwise we would know everything, and we don't.
Yeah.
But thank you very much for all your time, and if this goes live, just shoot me an email. Let me know if you post it.
Okay, that's not a problem. I'll probably get it encrypted, and I'll probably take a watch through of it, and then I'll post it.
All right, cool. Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks again, and I'll talk to you again soon. Maybe at some point would be awesome. If there's another topic you want to talk about, I'd totally be down to talk to you about it.
That sounds fun. That sounds interesting. I'll have to work it in on my days off, obviously, but
of course, of course.
So,
but yeah, like I told you in the email, man, anything I could do to help, that'd be awesome.
Okay.
All right, I'll talk to you later.
Yep, you too.
All right, bye.
Bye. Okay, well, that was interesting. It was the first interview I've ever done. Yeah, that was interesting. I don't really get to have civil discussions with people very often, but that was Keith. I'm not gonna give his last name out, but I don't know if he actually had it written on the screen or not. But yeah, uh, I hope to talk to him a little bit more. He's a good guy. But until next time.